Perfect. Okay. So welcome to Project Management for Research. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Marcela Isuster. I am a liaison librarian and the coordinator of the Digital Scholarship Hub here at McGill University. And I am in charge of organizing a lot of workshops like this one. So first of all, I want to get to know some of you a little bit. We have a smallish group today, so I think this will be fine. But if you want to write in the chat, what are you studying, why are you here, or what are you working on that you think this workshop would be useful for you, that'd be really awesome. So if you want to just put it in the chat, just for me to have an idea of who's here today. While you write, hopefully, I'll let you know that we have the workshop scheduled for an hour and a half. I don't think we will be here for an hour and a half, but you know, I always like to give myself enough time so that if we need the time, we will do it. So we have someone who's doing the doctoral dissertation in music performance. Perfect. Anyone else who wants to share? You don't have to give me many details. Okay, I have another doctoral student in neuroscience. A lot of music. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. That's really awesome. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you some tools and some guidelines or hopefully some best practices for you to get yourself organized. And then we're going to look at one tool, which is Microsoft Planner, which is something that I use in my own research to help you stay organized if that works for you. But even if you don't want to use the platform, everything else will be about getting yourself organized. So let's get started and we'll go from there. Thank you so much to everyone who has shared. So today we're going to talk first about managing your research project. And to do that, we have to think a little bit about what project management means in research as opposed to, you know, just general project management that you would do at a company. I will be sharing these slides with everyone today. So you will be getting the slides, everything that's linked on the slides, and I'll also share the recording. But the reason I'm mentioning the slides is because I have a lot of links in the slides. So for example, a lot of this info is from an open access book that exists. So you can access all of that if you want to read more. But let's talk a little bit, actually this is from an article, but let's talk a little bit about the differences between traditional project management and project management for research, which is what you will be doing. So the first thing is that goals can be abstract and flexible. They're not as targeted as you would have them in a traditional project management role where you have, you know, exactly what you're doing and you have a timeline that you need to adhere to. We don't necessarily have that in research. Yes, we have ideal timelines. Yes, we have things we want to do, but because we're doing research, the results of your research may surprise you. It may not be what you wanted or what you thought you were going to get. So it requires constantly thinking about those goals and changing them and being flexible enough to work with them. Our tasks and our places are nonlinear or they overlap. So we could be doing two things at the same time, even though in other types of project management, it would be more linear where like I do one thing and then the next, and then we'll move into the next. For us, you know, you could be working on two different things. On the one hand, if you're doing a PhD, for example, you are, you know, doing all this research for your comps while working on this other project that you're working on, what is maybe your research project, and the literature that you will get for your comps will be really useful for your project down the line, but they're not linear and they may have some overlap to them. You will have multiple responsibilities. So there's a lot of things that you have to do in the project, but also outside the project. If you are a researcher at McGill, odds are you have a job at McGill that you're supposed to be doing. Maybe you're teaching, maybe you're part of one of our institutes. If you are a student, you have a job as a student, and then you have your your project. It's not that your entire life is dedicated to this, although it feels like this. But it is very possible that you have other competing responsibilities that are not necessarily associated with this project. Maybe you're teaching, and you don't have a customer. It's not like you are a marketing firm that is like delivering a project for a customer. At the end of the day, the customer is yourself. You're doing it for yourself. Maybe your your funding agency, but at the end of the day, there's no customer, but there is peer accountability. So maybe you are working with other people in your lab, so you want to make sure that those things get done because you care about the other people in that lab that are working with you. A few other differences. First of all, there's lots of uncertainty. There's so many things that we don't know, from what the results of our research will be to whether we'll be able to get funding, if it will be possible to do. Negative results are not necessarily bad results. You may have a research project where you are testing a hypothesis and then your hypothesis turns out to be negative. It's not necessarily a bad result because you ran it, you tested it, and now we have that knowledge that, hey, this doesn't work. So it's not like if you get a negative result, everything is over. You will still be able to write and say, hey, we tested this and we found that there was no change, deriving from this particular intervention. When we're talking about research project management, we're talking more about leadership than management, because it's not necessarily like a company like structure or a hierarchical structure in that way. The other thing is that those roles of leadership can be flexible. So maybe if you're working with a research partner or with a research team, you will see that depending on the task, leadership will change. You will have other people being the lead person for a particular phase of the project. It may not always be you, or it may not always be the same person, because a lot of people are bringing different expertise and they may be more knowledgeable in a particular area, and that's why they check leadership. And then the last point is evaluation does not necessarily measure results against goals, because we talk about goals being abstract and flexible. So that means that evaluation does not necessarily means like, hey, like did I accomplish this particular thing? Instead, we may be measuring other things. We may be looking at other ways to measure success that not necessarily, hey, did I accomplish this thing? It's always important to remember that whenever we're doing research, there's so many things that are out of our control, and not even including funding. It's about like my goal may be to publish an article, but maybe the journal where I wanted to write it, like I couldn't get it in there, but I got it somewhere else. So because the goals are abstract and flexible, that means that the evaluation will not necessarily be against those goals. So as a project manager, or usually you'll be your PI, you will create and adjust plans for the work to be done. You will monitor the work that is being done, make sure that you have the resources for the work to be done. And when we talk about resources, it could be, we'll talk more about this probably, but it's not only funding, but it's like expertise. What do you need to get the work done? You will motivate and communicate with your team, and then we'll also communicate with external actors. One thing that it's really important to know is that much like research, project management is an iterative process. You will constantly need to review, revise, and adjust, because there's so many things that could happen that could affect the way this project is running. And I think that if you were doing research back in 2020, you know this more than anyone, because a lot of people had to check their research projects because we just couldn't do human research anymore, right? So, or research with human participants, that's what I meant. So you will notice that, people had to revise. So whenever we're doing project management, we're always evaluating where we're at and adjusting the plan accordingly. So let's talk about planning a little bit. So I really like starting project plans, and it covers a few things: our objectives and constraints, participants, resources, phases, and tasks. So let's go ahead and talk about some of those things now. So when we talk about objectives and constraints, we're talking about what are we trying to do? What is the goal of this project? What do we want to accomplish with this project? And we also have to think about what are our limitations. It'd be wonderful to do things, and there are things that we would love to do, but we just we can't do it because we don't have the resources, or we don't have permissions, or it's just something that cannot be done. It happens to me as a librarian, it happens to me a lot, that I have to explain to people that, yes, it'd be lovely to do that particular project, but that information, that text, that thing that they want, maybe it doesn't exist, maybe it's not for sale, maybe we just cannot get it. So we have to work within the limitations of what we can get. And then thinking about how you will measure success. So we talked before about how evaluation is not only like just looking at like, has a goal been achieved or not? And it's important to know that our success and how we measure success will take different forms at different times. So we have to think about how we will measure it. So what do we consider, what things will we consider to make sure that we know whether this was successful or not? So we have to think about like the measures, and also what we have to think about our targets. Maybe I cannot prove that my particular hypothesis is true, or I don't know if I will be able to prove it. Probably I have an idea, but I don't know if I will be able to do it. But I can say, you know, this project will be successful if I'm able to survey 50 people and get, you know, to get the answer to my research question. So it's not necessarily about like what the answer to my survey will be, but it's about like what I'm going to measure, and, you know, how many people I want to get, or how many, what will be the benchmark or the target for me to accomplish that particular thing that I'm measuring. Internal participants, we're not talking about research participants, we're talking about the participants in the project. So you will want to define these roles. We've talked about leadership before and how it shifts. Roles also shift because you will be, there's so many moving parts to a project that you will be doing different things throughout different times. You will want to consider what kind of expertise you're looking for. What is it that you need? So is it, maybe you need someone who's really good with qualitative software. So that's expertise that you will need, and you maybe want to get a participant in your research team that can do that. Or you want to learn it yourself, depending on what you're doing and what you're working with. You want to make sure that everyone is very clear about what the responsibilities of those particular roles are, and, you know, what do they need to do to make sure that that work is being taken care of. And then you want to make sure that you consider what kind of credit or compensation you will be giving people who are working on your project. So are you going to will they be considered authors? Will they be thanked in, you know, the acknowledgements? All of that has to be thought of and discussed, and make sure that everyone is okay with that. So I'll give you an example from librarians, and something that we work on quite a bit. Is a lot of my colleagues work on systematic reviews or scoping reviews with faculty, and they develop the searches and then they run the searches. And, you know, as compensation for that, or to give them credit, they are listed as authors in those articles, on those systematic reviews or scoping reviews, because they have done a lot of work. And that is a negotiation, or it's not a normal negotiation because it's been established, but that at one point was a negotiation of like, okay, if I do this amount of work, then what will be, how will I be credited for this work that I do? So that's something that you want to think of, especially if you're working with graduate students, or you're working with undergrads or things like that. You want to make sure that, you know, that everyone's clear on how will be either be credited or compensated for the work that they will do for the project. In terms of resources, as we talked about, it's not only like money and like things, although that definitely helps. But we're thinking about, you know, what kind of expertise do you need? Do you need someone who knows about which specific software? Do you need to talk to a librarian? Do you need to have a librarian on your team? Which a lot of, for example, systematic and scoping reviews need. Do you need someone who's really good with, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of things that people might need. Someone that has contacts with the community. So you have to think about what kind of expertise you need to get your project done, and then either get someone on your team that has that, or learn it yourself, depending on what kind of project you're working in. If you're doing your PhD dissertation or your thesis, then yes, definitely you will have to learn that on your own. You need to know like legally and like what kind of like ethics and legal requirements there are, particularly if you need ethics approval. So McGill is the REB. If you are American and you're new to McGill, it's the equivalent of the IRB. So it's our ethics review board. So you want to make sure that you have approval from our ethics board to do it if you're working with human participants. What tools you are going to need. If you need specific software, okay, do you need to get subscription? Is that available through McGill? So for example, at McGill, anyone can use SPSS, and you can just download it on your computer. SPSS is called software. But if you need it for something like NVivo, for example, we don't have a site license. So you can either have to think about whether you're going to come to the library to use it, or if you need to pay for a license, or if your lab can give you a license, things like that. What other materials you will be needing. And then you need to come up with a budget for two things. Number one is for funding. I say Excel is your friend, and Excel is always your friend when you're having to do anything like that. But thinking about what kind of, the money that you need, if you need to go look for external funding and things like that. And then also another one for your time. So you need to budget your time to know how much time will be dedicated to each particular task, particularly when we talk about people who have other responsibilities, like we said in the beginning. So now we're going to talk about phases and tasks, which is basically who will do what and when. A good suggestion is to start with the work breakdown structure, which is where you divide your project into this like buckets of things that need to be done, or these phases that need to be done. And then from there, you come up with the individual tasks that will count, that will make that particular bucket or that particular large part of the project happen. So if we look at the example that we have here, we have data collection, and then under data collection, we have the study design, the distribution of a survey, and then a reminder that the survey needs to be filled out to people. And then we come to analysis, and we have, data cleanup and then coding, and assuming it says analysis, I cannot say because of my transcript because of the caption. And then for dissemination, so maybe we'll have a journal selection, so deciding where it's going to go, writing the actual thing, and then submitting it. So this is a good idea for you to identify all the tasks that need to be done so that we can actually get this project done. And then you want to make sure that you are tracking the work that you're doing. I'm horrible at this, and I really struggle with it. So if you feel like you're horrible at this, I completely understand you. But we talk about, we have identified your activities and tasks, or the things that need to be done. We have identified what kind of constraints, what kind of problems we may have, or we may encounter when we're trying to do it. You want to establish how long each activity will take, or each task will take, and who will be doing it. You want to establish what's the correct order for things to happen. What do you need to have completed before you can move on to the next step? What is a prerequisite? What could be a co-requisite? You want to make sure that you know how you should be doing, and like what parts are integral for you to be able to continue doing the project. And then you will create an initial schedule, which will not be the schedule that you will end up with, because you will be revising it over and over and over and over until you're done. Because again, things happen, and you think you have a grasp on it, and you don't. So there are a couple of ways to do it. There are quite a few tools for tracking and organizing your work. Using a visual tool can help you because you track the work, because you can actually see. You can help you identify the order of those activities and just see, what needs to be done and what's the best order for it to be done. It allows you to establish relationships within different activities or tasks. Again, I would talk about like, oh, like should this needs to be done, like task A needs to be done before task B because we need the results of task A in order to complete task B. And then identify moments where you will have bottlenecks, where you have too many things coming at the same time, where you may encounter scheduling issues, things like that, and just know that those are there so you can plan around them. And having visual tools really helps you because you can actually see it as opposed to it being abstract. So a very popular one or a popular way of doing this are Gantt charts. When I taught this the first time, people were asking me where I got this template, which is it's just like a graphic design template, so it's not a good one. But on the slides that we're sending, like on the title of the slide, this is a link, and it takes you to an Excel template for a Gantt chart if that's something that you want to do. It's not Excel, it's a Google Sheets, but you can download it into Excel if you want. But it's a good template to do a Gantt chart. But they're very popular. It just helps you, visualize things and see how things work. So this is one way of doing it, and I know that a lot of people like to do it. And then I'm going to show you another one, which is Microsoft Planner. I'm just going to leave the slide because I'm going to go Microsoft Planner. I'm going to send you, I'm going to put in the chat the link to Microsoft Planner in case you want to follow along or just know about it. It will only work if you have access to Office 365, which is if you are a McGill student, faculty, staff, you will have access to. If you're coming from another institution, you may not have access to, but you can just take a look at it and then see if that would work for you. So Microsoft Planner is a service, or it's a software that Microsoft has that is part of our subscription to Office 365. And it allows you to create planners or to create, just work plans. Microsoft has other tools that are better for project management, but we just don't have them. So this will have to do. If you ever seen Trello, this is very similar, but it has a few things that I like over Trello if you are, if everyone's on Microsoft. So we're gonna get started. This is what it looks like. If you're trying to log in on your McGill member, it's gonna be your McGill email and password. And you come here, it's called MS Planner. And then when you click on new plan, it gives you a few options. I'm just going to use the project management, but you can do, actually, I'm going to do the simple plan today just because I don't know why. You can also just create one from scratch, but this will give us a little bit more visual entertainment while I do it. So I'm just going to click on it. And then I'm just going to call it Tuesday. If you are working with teams, and this integrates to teams, and I'll show you then another way of doing it, but you can add it to a team that you already have. So you can just search for that team. So for example, I'm working on a book right now, so I have a team for that book. I could just add it there, and that would be everyone who is part of that team would actually be able to see the planner. I'm not going to do it for now, but just know, and then you can make it public or you can make it private. It's really up to you. And I'm just going to click on create. And then it's going to create my plan. Of course, it's going to take some time. Perfect. So I have my plan over here. And again, because I told it to create because I'm using a template, it already has some things. If you were going to do one from scratch, then all of this would be empty. But I'm going to show you some of the things that you can do with this, why I find it really useful when you're working on a project. So we have these different buckets and then we have tasks. So I would say, if you remember our work breakdown structure, basically each bucket is this set of activities, or these activities that we have to do, and then the little boxes under each one of them, those will be our tasks. to add a task is really easy. You'll always have this add a task. You click on it. So I'm going to say task number 1. I'm going to give it due date. So I'm going to do June 22nd. And then I could assign it to someone. So I'm the only one in this team. So I'm going to assign it to myself. Actually, and that's it. That means that once the task has been added, I'm going to get an email about it saying like, hey, Marcella, someone assigned you a task. Now, this is very simple. So when I click on it now, I'm just going to click on the name of the task. I actually see a lot more than when I originally did my task. So I can change the bucket. I can say where I'm at. So maybe I'm now in progress, for example. I can give it a start date. So this would only be the deadline, but if I want to see it more like the entire time that's going to take me to the date, I could actually give it a start date. So I'm going to start it tomorrow, for example. Whether it's something that needs to be done weekly or monthly or yearly, whatever we want. You can add some notes. So if you're assigning this task to someone else or just for yourself, just to know what do you mean by this, you can just add notes. You can add a checklist. So let's say there's something that needs to be done and you want to make sure that everything has been covered. Let's say you're applying or you're submitting your REB, right? Your ethics approval. So you're going to have maybe your first item would be application. And then I'm going to add another one. I just hit enter. It's going to be include survey, because I want to make sure that I include the survey that I'm using. Maybe I'll include check research data management strategy. So once you give yourself a checklist, if there's something that includes like a lot of different tasks that you want to make sure that whoever's doing it or yourself, that you have done everything, you can just add a checklist for yourself so that you can click on it and know that like everything that you needed to do for this particular task has been done before you can check it off. You can add comments, and then other people can add comments. So if you have questions or anything like that, or if they want to clarify anything, they can just add it to that. Then you can also attach things. It will suggest attachments that you already have. So for example, these are just like things I've been working on. Like this just takes from whatever, like from your SharePoint, the files are there. But let's say, for example, you need someone who's going to, again, we're talking about the REB, so you can just add the survey attachment so that you know that the person has it. It could be that like maybe you need them to read an article or to summarize an article, whatever it is, you can just add the attachment there and then it will be there so people can actually see it. And then that's it. And now it has changed the way it looks. You can move tasks from buckets to bucket if you want. If you want to add another bucket, if you come down here, you can just, you can add a new bucket. And then you can just add more tasks to that. So, and this is one way of looking at it, but you can also see it as a list of tasks. So visually, like you have a lot of ways of playing with that as a visually. And then this is the board. You have the charts. I don't like the charts because I don't really understand like what the benefit of it is. But if you wanted to see like how accomplished you are, you can see the charts. And then you can also see it as a schedule. So you will see all the different things that you have. And it will just have it like this. So you will see if a task is, if you have set a start date, it will just cover the entire time. So sort of like a Gantt chart-ish if you want it. And then you can look at the different things and see if you have a task that are scheduled that don't have a date yet, then it will tell you here, like, what are the tasks that you have not scheduled yet. So this is a nice way of looking at it. It will also send a reminder for your, to yourself that you, or to anyone who has a deadline. It will send them a reminder that a task is due, and when, and also if a task is past due. So that means that you can actually just, you don't have to remind people. People will be reminded. That's something I personally love about this, because I don't need to nag people about it. People can like nag themselves. And then a few other things that you can do with it is you can, like, if you go to any of this will actually just take you to Outlook. So you could email everyone that's there. You could export it to an Excel that will just give you a list of every task. And then if you go to plan settings, you can change the way it looks. You can also, make it private, public, and then you can also like decide what the notifications are going to be. So do you want it to be notified when a task is complete or not? Do you want to receive an email when someone assigns a task to you? Do you want to have a reminder, when something is late or due today or during the next 7 days? So it allows you for some customization. And then I forgot to show you the last thing, which is how do you mark a task as done? Basically, you just come here and just check on it. And that's it. And then you can just change it this way. So now you have to complete a task. So I find that this really useful, but I also know some people may find emails a little bit stressful. But again, it's all about having different ways of doing things and having different ways of interacting with information to find a way that works best for you. So again, this is MS Planner. Just going to go back to our slideshow. And go from there. Track the word. We have done our Gantt chart. There are other tools. There's something called a PERT chart. There's also something called a key activity schedule, activities chart. A lot of it you can find it in this book that I have here. I find that either a Gantt chart or using MS Planner will be the things that most people will tend to go for. But there are other things. I'll be honest, I don't really understand PERT charts. So you can choose if that works for you. But if not, Gantt charts or the MS Planner might be a really useful one. A few best practices for scheduling. The first one is, you want to choose your direction. You want to know, what you're doing, how we're going. You want to have a plan first of like, what do I want to do and what is my end goal? You also want to schedule your main events first. So what are the big things that need to happen? This reminds me of, there's a story about this prof that goes into a school or a class and brings a jar and this big rocks. So he puts the rocks in the jar and asks the students, is the jar full? And they said, yes, because he has reached the top of the jar, but then he dumps like smaller rocks that go into the like little spaces that the big rocks have left. And it goes all the way with sand and with water until, basically we'll learn that, put your big things first and everything else will sort of like accommodate around them. Same thing about when we're working on a schedule for our research project. We want to make sure that we have those big important things set first and then accommodate, like put everything else around it as we need to, or the smaller tasks around it or around them. Include buffers, but try to avoid using them. I feel like this is common sense, but I will add buffers to the buffers, because you will be using them. I know we say like, oh, try to not use a buffer. You always end up using them. And sometimes I would say if you're working with other people, what you may want to do is have buffers, but don't tell people that there are buffers. So I'll give you an example. I mentioned I'm working on a book right now, and I have a few, I have other authors that are writing chapters for the book, and I gave them a deadline of July 10 for the first draft. Now, I know that if I don't get them on July 10th, it's totally fine. Because I have included a buffer for me to work on those chapters and for, just to think about when do I need to have like those first drafts edited. They don't know that. I know that. So I've added that buffer, but I'm letting them think that, oh, okay, I need it by July 10th because I want to make sure that I have them, because I know someone will be late. But this way I can just manage those late chapters better than if everyone is going, to the deadline. So I would say include buffers. If you can add buffers to the buffers, that's awesome. And then also, if you're working with the people, maybe don't tell them that there's a buffer so that you can actually get, have some more leeway when you are working and when you are trying to manage everyone else's schedule. but definitely like think about having some buffers. So if you know that you need to send your REB by July 1st, maybe you want to try to have it ready a week before. It doesn't always happen, but it's good to have those buffers because it allows you a little bit more breathing room. And if something goes wrong, and something will go wrong at some point, then you know that you're able to work with that and just you know, it will still be on time if we need to. Okay, so we did resources with outputs with the participants with their tasks. Let's talk about a little bit about outputs now. So thinking about how you're going to disseminate your results. So how are you going to share the information that you got from this particular project that you're working on? And for some of you, it'll be really easy because you're working on a PhD. So it's going to be your dissertation. If you're working on your master's, it's going to be your thesis. But you will have a lot of information that maybe you want to disseminate in other ways, or you may just be working on a project. So maybe you want to do an article, maybe you're going to write a book, maybe you're just doing a report. But thinking about how you will disseminate the results will help you plan your project and plan what needs to be done for your project. If you are going to do something that will have a lot of that you know would benefit from having like visual content, maybe you want to make sure that you're recording that visual content, either via photographs or filming or whatever it is, as you're working on the project. So thinking about what your end result is going to look like will really help you get organized when you're coming up with your schedule of things that need to be done and how you will be, and identifying the tasks and things like that, and resources as well. Whatever you want to do, you want to make sure that you have a research data management plan. So this will be eventually if you're getting like funding, eventually you will be required to have one. It's still not here yet, but like it's becoming more and more prevalent in funding agencies. So you want to have a way of like how I'm going to store and share my data. We have a lot of recorded workshops on our YouTube channel, and I'm just linking to the recorded ones because I don't know if we're going to have any this summer. We have them every semester, but I don't know if we're going to have them in the summer. But you want to make sure that you are thinking about how you're going to store your data, and also if you're going to share your data, that if it's possible for you to share it, please do so. But also we know that like sometimes not possible, but those are things that you have to think about in terms of how you're going to do things. Along the same lines, when you're thinking about, just going back to our outputs, if your funding agency requires you to, have something that will be open access within 12 months, then you have to think about what kind of journal you're going to publish in. So these are all things that you want to think at the beginning of your project. So then you're not surprised at the end. You want to make sure that you know what you're planning on doing, and that you have all the resources to do it. And the earlier you think about these things, the better it is. And it's not something that only happens to students. These are conversations that I have with faculty sometimes, because this was not done early on. There are certain journals where if you want to publish there are things that need to happen at the beginning of your study design. And you need to know that, especially like a lot of medical journals, there are certain things that need to happen at the beginning of your study design, because maybe you need to deposit your study design or your protocol somewhere. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind when you are coming up with your plan, so there are no surprises at the end, so that all this work that you did is not thwarted by something that maybe should have happened in the beginning. Okay, so I forgot that I have the slide. So as I was talking about publication plans and the compliance with funding bodies, so a lot of times, like if you have funding from the trade agency, from the government of Quebec as well, your content needs to be open access within a certain amount of time. So choosing where to publish is very important, because you need a journal that is either open access or that it will allow you to become open access within 12 months. That, and when I say that, is that they will allow you to put a copy of the accepted manuscript into an institutional repository, like we have at McGill, we have his scholarship. Those are things that you need to think about, because again, we don't want you to have issues at the end of the project because of something that maybe you didn't know before. So making sure that you know what your funding body is asking you to do with that content. You want to make sure that, like, once I ensure proper timing, especially is, because you need something that will be open, like usually it's 12 months. We do have more information if you click on the guide that we have here. And again, I will be sending all the slides. If you click on it, then it will give you more information on how these are all things that both with the research data management plans and with publication plans, those are things that your librarians can help you with. They can guide you to the right resources to help you find this information, or if you have a question about it. So just know that the library is here to support you with this, to help you, to guide you to get to the answers that you need. To just know that. And then depending on your field, you will be working with other plans as well. So for example, if you are doing a digital project, and I know that for output, go there. For output, I put like a thesis dissertation, an article, a book, or a report. But if you're working in the humanities, and particularly digital humanities, you know that maybe your output will not be an article or a book or a report, but maybe it will be a digital object. So if you are working with a digital project, maybe you need to have a preservation plan on how that digital object will continue to live after you're done with it, after your project is finished. So I have an example one here. And then you also want to make sure that if you're working, for example, on a systematic review or a scoping review, you may need to report your methodology. So you will need to have a plan, a protocol on how you're going to do your systematic or scoping review. And then there are ways of reporting it. So all those different things, depending on what your field is, you may have to do. Again, great questions to ask your librarian if you're unsure, if you don't know. We can definitely guide you in these areas of like what, if there's anything that you need to do, or if you don't know how to find one. We are people who you can ask and get more info about it. Okay. I'll show you at the end how to know who your librarian is if you do not know, but I'll just show about collaboration tools, which is I think it's our last section. And it's basically about Microsoft Teams. If you're not using Microsoft Teams, you should be using Microsoft Teams. I know it's really clunky and it's rough on your computer. But if you're working on a research project, I find it extremely useful. For a couple of reasons, you can connect to your team, you can talk with your team. By the way, we are not sponsored in Microsoft in any way, shape, or form. But you will find that a lot of the products that we tend to encourage people to use are Microsoft products, and that has to do with McGill's cloud computing policy, especially when we're talking about research data. Microsoft and their whole cloud has been vetted by McGill IT, and we know that information is secure and it's compliant with a lot of the regulations here in Canada and also here in Quebec. And in terms of privacy and security of that information, and because of that, we tend to gravitate more towards Microsoft products than maybe other products, because they're just not as safe or secure when we're talking about participant data. But it also, so Microsoft Teams, if you've never used it, 3 years into the pandemic, I'm pretty sure that you probably have, but in case you haven't, you can communicate with your team through channels, chats, and team meetings. So you can have Zoom there. It's not Zoom, but you can have, online meetings there, but you also have an ongoing chat where you can share messages and things like that. So it's a little bit like if Zoom and Slack and a few other things together. For me, what I love the most is that you can have, for your different teams, you can have files. So you can share files that everyone can work on. They are in SharePoint. You get a boatload of storage. for your team. So it's a good place where you can store things. It's safe, it's secure. If you are actually teaching, you can also have assignments and share feedback and things like that. Well, you should use it. As I said, it's complying with McGill's cloud directive. It's secure. And that just, especially if you're working with research data, if you're getting an RAB, if you're getting ethics approval, like it's kind of what you need to use, because we need to make sure that this is secure. And so, you have like, why did I write this? Teams feature is create a one-stop shop for your collaboration needs. As I said, yes, you can actually just, you can share files, you can connect with other people, you can have meetings. I pretty much everything I do from Teams when I have to work with other people. I really like it, but it's just more than just the chat of the video conferencing. I'll show you one of my teams. Hopefully I can share it. I'll just open Teams and then I'll share it with you. 1 second. So I have I just want to make sure that I'm sharing the correct thing. Yes. So as you can see, I have a lot of teams that I work on for different things. So for example, this is a conference that we were planning. So for each part of the conference, we had a channel where people could talk about things, but we also had, it allows you to have files. I think at one point you could also just create like a Microsoft Planner tab here. I quickly abandoned this one, but that's my issue. You can add, so if you have like some Microsoft surveys, you can put them in here as well as tabs. So there's a lot of things that you can do so that you are able to manage your project. If you go here, it's going to show you to add new apps. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can add. Not all of the ones that you see are like McGill has access to, but this one's really should. So if you want to do Microsoft Planner on Teams, you would use this one, which is Tasks by Planner. I use forms quite a bit, so whenever I need to do a form, I'll just use this. So there's a couple of things that you can do just make your life a lot easier. You can also put like websites in here. It's a lot of fun things that you can do with Teams. Again, I'm not paid by Microsoft Teams. I'm just a fan. But I think for me, the main part is it's a great collaboration tool, but also it is compliant with McGill. And that's the most important thing. And compliant with like research ethics. So that's why we tend to recommend it. So who can use it? So if you are a McGill person, student, faculty, staff, you have full access to Teams. You can add someone to a team that is not a McGill person. They just can't create new teams. Actually, no, these are McGill affiliates. So if you're at a hospital, things like that. But guests can still participate in teams. They just have limited capabilities. A few best practices. Ensure that you always have 2 team owners because people leave, right? So you want to make sure that if one person leaves, there's still one person who owns the team. So at least you're going to have 2 owners. Whenever possible, have permanent users take the meeting notes. So that means that if you have guests in your team, you want the people who are McGill people to do the notes, just so that like that account remains live longer. And then use channels for collaborations in a specific topic rather than a general chat. So like I showed you in that conference thing we had for each sort of like part of a subcommittee of the conference, we had a different channel. So like that conversation could be held there. And we knew that it was easy to find those documents that we needed and everything. It's just a way of getting yourself organized. Okay, so that is all for me. I told you it wasn't going to be an hour and a half. I'm just going to stop the recording.